like a lot of you, I anticipated that Super Bowl week would be all about the Super Bowl, and we would be talking about the Chiefs, and we would be talking about the 49ers and what was likely to happen in that game. But yesterday afternoon, as news broke about what happened with Kobe Bryant, I was stunned. You were stunned. I think everyone across the nation and around the world who has watched Kobe Bryant play basketball and watched him grow up effectively over the past generation in the public eye was stunned. Kobe, at 41 years old, was and is a larger-than-life character, someone who seemed absolutely indestructible and someone who still seemed, even in retirement, very, very young. And certainly of late, what we had come to see with Kobe Bryant was his growth and evolution as a dad. He had just had his fourth daughter. He seemed very happy and content in a way, frankly, that most are not when their athletic careers come to a close. And he seemed like an athlete who had made that transition very, very well and had a lot to offer to the country and to the world, and certainly to his family and friends for another several generations that we would have been able to watch him grow. And for me personally, we're around the same age, and I think when you are around the same age as an athlete, I'm 40, Kobe 41 years old, you feel like you know that person a little bit because you've gone through many of life's steps alongside them in some way: fatherhood, marriage, growth in career. And it's just it's a challenge to see this happen because, in addition to the fact that Kobe Bryant is one of the most famous athletes in the world, he's also, I think, why this story has such a pull on people everywhere, even people who may or may not be very big sports fans, is because it also combines two of the biggest fears of every parent. When you become a parent, your number one fear, dad, mom, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, it doesn't matter who you are or what your background is, your number one fear when you become a parent is something bad happening to one of your children. And to have a 13-year-old daughter on that helicopter alongside of Kobe Bryant, the number one fear of every parent is realized in that moment when that 13-year-old girl, along with several other people, husbands, wives, dads, moms, brothers, sisters that went down in that helicopter, something bad happening to your kid is the number one fear of every parent. The second fear, I think the two biggest fears of every parent were realized in this tragic incident. It's something happening to you, the parent, when your other kids are young. As soon as you have kids, and I'm speaking for myself, I've got three boys who are, in fact, my oldest turns 12 today, and then I've got a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old. When you have those kids, your immediate focus becomes, I want to make sure that I am there for them for as long as I possibly can be, and certainly to get them into adulthood. And so in this horrible, tragic incident, we had really the two biggest fears of every parent realized in the same awful incident, which is something happening to one of your young children and something happening to you while they are young. And this really strikes home, I think, for a lot of people. I bet a lot of you, as you were laying in bed last night preparing to go to bed, you laid there and thought about these fears yourself. You wondered what might have happened if it had been you or your wife. I think it brings home so many of the fears of parents everywhere. And it doesn't matter if you're a superstar and one of the best athletes in the world, one of the best athletes in the history of your sport. It humanizes in a tragic way what we saw happen yesterday. And it is sobering, it is shocking, and it is particularly difficult, I think, to grapple with for many people out there, whether you were a big Kobe Bryant fan or not. It is just a staggering difficulty, and I think you saw that resonate across the world of sports, well beyond the world of basketball, into basically all walks of life. And in thinking about it, the sort of the analogy that made me remember is it feels almost to me like when Princess Di died, and that's not a sports connection. Certainly, if you want to talk about sports, there are lots of athletes who have died Dale Earnhardt Jr. is probably the most prominent in sort of a shocking way. Now, that obviously happened while he was in the middle of his sport. But to me, the way that people responded back in, I believe it was 1997, when Princess Di, at around the same age as Kobe Bryant, this larger-than-life, iconic figure, died in a tragic incident totally unexpectedly. Now, she died in a traffic accident in Paris, France. But the outpouring of grief feels very similar to what we saw in that moment in time. And I think that what both of those individuals would have in common is that they are global icons who both felt larger than life and also were struck down in the prime of their life long before you would have anticipated it ever happening in a sudden and awful event. And so, frankly, we thought that today's show would be talking about Super Bowl, but instead, for the entire show, we're going to be talking about Kobe, his life, his legacy, his impact on many of the lives of our listeners across the country and around the world. And we've got several guests. Petros Papadakis is going to come on with us, AM 570 LA Sports. He usually comes on Tuesday, but I texted him and I said, hey, man, will you get up early with us, 3:20 a.m. in LA? He is scheduled to wake up and join us. And so Doug Gottlieb is going to be with us. He had become a friend of Kobe Bryant's, their daughters and kids. They lived near each other in Orange County and had become somewhat close in recent times. So he's going to come on with us here in hour one as well and talk about Kobe. But I want to bring in, we talk and we joke a lot about Laker fans on here because we have a couple of huge Laker fans with Danny G and Roberto. And Danny G's with me here in Miami. Roberto is out in the LA studio. But I want to bring both of you guys in. First of all, Danny G, you are a Laker homer. You are a dyed-in-the-wool Laker fan. Kobe is of your generation. What were your thoughts? When did you become aware of this, and kind of what have you been thinking about since you heard the news?
Man, it felt like a bad dream. It still does. I was on a flight here to Miami out of LAX, and it's crazy because Bill Plaschke, the longtime sports writer from
he wrote a great column for the LA Times. Yeah,
he was on my flight, and he saw my Laker tattoo when we were boarding. And we had a quick conversation about the Lakers. Kobe is part of LA identity. I mean, he's part of the city's.
Not part of. For many people, he is the identity. It's crazy. I mean, around the world, he is for most people. I know LeBron is there now. I know Magic Johnson. But when you say Los Angeles and you mention the world of sports, I would say Kobe is by far, for most people out there, the very first thing that people think of when they think of the Los Angeles sports community.
Oh, for sure. When you have a number 8 or a number 24 on, you get dozens of people yelling at you, Kobe! And it's just part of our daily, just simple things. In our Sherman Oaks studio, when we throw a piece of paper in the wastebasket, we yell Kobe.
Yeah.
He is part of the fabric of the city, and it's surreal how quiet things got in Los Angeles and how everybody gathered at the Staples Center. What horrible timing for the Grammys, too, because It was like a death happened, and they're all gathered inside, and Alicia Keys is like, what do I do? She opened and did that Boys to Men classic song, which was cool. But, it felt like losing a close family member. I heard from friends and family that I haven't heard from in a while. And I think that this hits home because it does feel like we were all close to him. It felt like we all knew him personally. And some of us in media did get to meet him, and he was so cool. And to watch what he was doing after basketball, because you remember he was so obsessed and such an obsessed player that people worried about him and what would happen to him once he didn't have basketball anymore. But he took that competitive fire that he's famous for with him into his post-basketball career with his company and coaching his daughter and everything else he was doing with his family. And what a huge loss, man. I mean, I watched grown men cry on TV yesterday, and I'm sitting there choked up, tearing up as well. All of us had a cry yesterday. It was crazy.
Yeah, it's interesting, too. I think the daughter and coaching his daughter's basketball team and the degree to which he had transitioned so well into a post-athletic career, a lot of us out there, regardless of what your backgrounds are, do that, right? You coach Little League basketball, and that was one of the first things I thought as some of these details came out, and we heard that he was on the helicopter traveling for his daughter's basketball games or practice. When I hopped on a plane, and I think a lot of parents think about this, I on Saturday flew down here for the Super Bowl for the week, and I left directly from the Little League basketball game that I was coaching for my 9-year-old. I always think that regardless of how good you are at a sport or bad you are at a sport, coaching little kids will humanize that sport for you. And I think there are a lot of you out there who have been involved in, youth league athletics with your kids, either coaching or taking them around, and you've been in that experience of traveling and going to a game. And I just, again, I think one of the reasons why this is striking so many people in such a deep way is the humanizing nature of the way it happened, and the fact that this realizes two of the biggest fears of every parent: something awful happening to one of your children and something awful happening to you in a sudden way that takes you away from being able to raise your children. Roberto, you're out in L.A., and most of the crew is out in L.A., and I'm sure that the city almost feels like it has a pall over it, and there's sort of a stunned feeling. There are a lot of Fox Sports employees that are from L.A., and they were all flying out today too. And they said as news broke, sometimes you had Wi-Fi on the plane, sometimes you did not. And when you got to the point where the news sort of rapidly spread through the airport and through the airplane, had people that just kind of looking at their phones in stunned disbelief. Scott Shapiro, the vice president of Fox Sports Radio, was flying out here, and I texted him about the news, and it took him a couple hours to get back to me. And he said he hadn't gotten Wi-Fi on the plane until he suddenly saw people start talking about it on the plane who had been plugged in, because you're getting on a plane in L.A. flying all the way to Miami. That's a 5.5 hour flight at least, and so you sort of enter sometimes that communication void, and suddenly everybody becomes aware of it, and there's sort of a communal grieving as everyone contemplates the impact of the Kobe Bryant death and what it means to the larger sports community. What can you tell us about the vibe in LA right now, Roberto?
Just the whole city is in mourning, man. It's just a sad. It's been a sad day. It's been a long. When the news broke at 9, I've heard the news 10 o'clock a.m. on Sunday. It's been a long, tough whole day, man. It's very sad, emotional. I was in church with my wife because I hadn't gone to church in a while, so I'm like, all right, I got to be a good Catholic again. And then she pulled out her phone and had this look on her face that I was like, what the heck is going on? And we didn't have our daughter with us, so I was kind of scared. And then she's like, "Oh, here, come over here." We walked out of mass, and then look at this. And after I realized, okay, thank God it wasn't my daughter. Then I saw what it said. I was like, oh my God, like, is this true or what? And then after a while, after it finally set in that it was true, it kind of broke down and started crying right there outside of mass with my wife. It's sad because when Kobe was a rookie in the NBA, I was a sophomore in high school. When he won his first NBA title, I was 19. When the Lakers lost in the finals in 2008, I got married. When I got married to my wife that same September, and when they beat the Celtics in 2010, I turned 30 years old. And then when he finally became retired, became a full-time father in 2016, I had just become a full-time father when my daughter was born in September 27, 2015. And seeing him become a great father and husband was awesome. And the fact that he's leaving behind his wife and 3 daughters is extremely gut-wrenching. I never thought it would ever get so emotional for the loss of someone I never knew personally. It seems downright silly, but the joy he brought to my life is tremendous, and the memories will be everlasting. His work ethic was virtually unmatched. And that's about it, man. Sad.
I think you're hitting on something that certainly for people who are around our age, his life points of demarcation, as you just laid out, are very similar to many of ours.
Yeah.
Getting married, going and advancing in your career, having kids, becoming a dad, growing in life, and it's there are always, again, I said I'm 40, he's 41, athletes who you feel like, because they're around the same age as you, that you have something in common with just based on your trajectory of life. And certainly there are people of all ages that are impacted, but I think if you are a young dad like you are, Roberto, or like I am, relatively speaking, again, this hits home in a way that I think transcends certainly well beyond the world of sports. And again, I think brings home two of the biggest fears of every parent out there. Joined now by Doug Gottlieb. Doug, you knew Kobe personally. You guys lived not far apart from each other. You're both raising young families. What was your reaction when you heard the news?
Well, I'll paint a picture for you. So I did Kentucky, Texas Tech on Saturday night. I had to get up super early, fly back halfway across the country because my daughter, Harper, had a writing show. My son had a baseball and basketball game. So I just wanted to get, one extra day in before I head out to Miami. So my daughter gets done writing, and she did really well. I come over, and she's bawling. Now, everybody was on Twitter, with the story from TMZ, and she said, my friend died in a helicopter crash. I was like, no, Gianna wasn't on it. But she knew Gianna she went to school with Gianna for a couple of years, and they're kind of ran in the same circles. And she said, no, my friend Alyssa died. And I was like, what? And so it's for me personally, Clay, just full disclosure, those are all Newport Beach families. That's where we live. Not only did I know Kobe, we knew two of the other families, and Mrs. Mauser is like my daughter's PE teacher, and she leaves 3 kids. So it's a very local tragedy as well as like an international one. It's so sad.
So you knew multiple of these families that were involved. Yeah. What was Kobe like in your experience since he finished playing basketball, right? As a dad, everybody knows Kobe, the basketball player.
So it's interesting. The first time I moved to California and I was at CBS, we put our kids in that same school, and that was the year he tore his Achilles tendon. And I'm telling you, he was around there. I think that year changed him. That year kind of saved him and made him this business mogul he became, because before that he was so singularly focused on like winning more championships and catching Mike. He was not. It's not like he had great balance, but he was a pretty balanced guy. Like he was very serious about the Mamba. First it was volleyball, and then it was basketball. His oldest played volleyball, and he would send me videos of plays they were running, and he was super involved in it. So as a dad and like a coach, he was hardcore. They practiced 5-6 days a week, and kind of no excuses. But and he'd get into the games. But yeah, I mean, he was like a super coach dad guy who organized this basketball program that all the girls are going to high school together next year, and then they're all going to go play in college. It's pretty amazing stuff he was doing.
And obviously, like the transition that he had, you just spoke to it, from athlete to dad to post-retirement. A lot of athletes struggle with that. He didn't seem to. I mean, that's one of the things. I mean, his life seemed like it was almost just starting in many ways.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because, I mean, like I wasn't a huge Kobe fan. And the more we got to know each other, he's obviously very, very bright. There are guys that we give credit for being bright because, they say the right thing in front of the camera. But like you spend a little time with Kobe Bryant, you start talking about what he was doing in entertainment and the people that he was kind of commissioning to write books and all this creativity. I mean, it was a little over the top, but I mean, yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. And I think what we misjudged, because I was talking to Rick Bucher and Chris Broussard about this, is everybody in basketball is like, dude, Kobe can't be a GM, right? He can't relate to people that don't work as hard as he is. Can't be a president. And what's he going to do? Well, he turned that kind of competitive nature into all this other kind of all the business enterprises. It's really interesting. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure had he not torn his Achilles tendon if he'd be in the same place, but he was a pretty interesting guy. He was up at 4 o'clock every morning working out at Equinox. Like he was crazy, insane work ethic even after he got done playing.
You talked about the tragedy it's a global story, but it's also a local tragedy for many communities in LA. How do they recover? And how do people in your community recover?
I mean, he just becomes, another Southern California icon that's gone too early. Sadly, like he was the picture of health, right? But I think, it's a really interesting. I mean, how about the fact that it happens the day after LeBron passes him in all-time scoring, right? And I don't think. I mean, look, it's still Kobe's town, and now it'll always. I mean, I almost feel sympathy for LeBron in that sense. And he can win 3 more championships. It's still Kobe. It's Kobe's pound.
Yeah.
So, like, it's a fascinating dynamic that he, started sitting courtside with Gianna for Hawks games because Trae Young's her favorite player. And then, he started coming more to Lakers games and interacting more. And, it's interesting. When he played, Clay, guys didn't like him. He was respected. Nobody liked him. Now, even before yesterday, before he died, if you would have polled NBA players, like, who's your favorite player of all time, I guarantee he would have won. And it's crazy. Like, he's way more liked now than when he was as a player. It's a really interesting dynamic.